Year 6s, it's Mr. Conway here. Now for today's how-to guide, we're actually continuing with algebra, looking at our function machines. The LO today is to identify relationships between numbers. Now, what's different about today's functions compared to the functions we did yesterday is we've actually got two function machines this time instead of just the one. So let's see if we can solve this. We have our inputs and our outputs, but the function itself, we don't know what that is. So our first task is to try and discover what the function is. So let's have a look at our first set of inputs. We have 4, 6 and 3. So let's look at number 4 first of all. Number 4 goes into our function machine, so we can go down this way. Something magical happens inside and then it comes back out as a number 8. 8 is my output. What's the pattern? Maths is all about patterns. 4 multiplied by something equals 8. I'm sure you've already guessed it already. It's 4 multiplied by 2. Let's just check that's the same for all of the inputs we've got so far. 6 lots of 2 is 12. Good. 3 lots of 2 is 6. So there we are. Our first function is definitely multiplied by 2. But remember, we have two function machines and we need to figure out what the function is for this now. My input is going to be an 8, so it's going to be like a chain, like a big train track. 4 times 2 is 8. 8 is now going to be my input for this function machine. So 8 goes in and 9 comes out. What could my function be? 8 goes in and 9 comes out. What's the pattern? It's actually quite a simple one, isn't it? Plus 1. 8 plus 1 is 9. Let's check that's the same for the rest of our inputs. 12 goes in, plus 1 gives me 13. Good so far. Let's check the final input. 6 plus 1 is 7. That's pretty good. This is a two-way function machine. I've got multiplied by 2 and plus 1. So I was going to check that that's all correct. And if I rub off my board, you'll see that yes, luckily Mr. Conway had done his homework and it's all worked out correctly. So these are my inputs multiplied by 2. These are my outputs. My outputs turn into an input, so they go into a second function machine, plus 1, and I get one of these as my output. Now I've figured out my function, what I want to know is this. What, if I could put any number in there, how could I calculate what the output would be? I want it to be any number, not just, what would be easier? Would it be easier for me just to write a letter that represents any number? Or would it be easier for me to write every single number that I know into this tiny little box? Using a letter, Mr. Conway, I hear you scream. So this time, instead of writing a number, I'm going to use a letter. To remember, in algebra, we use letters to represent any number. So this time, I'm simply going to put A. A goes in. A multiplied by 2. Remember, A could be any number. So how would I write this as an equation, as a calculation? 2 lots of A. So I could write 2 times A. Now, what do you think a problem might be with somebody reading this calculation, reading this equation, using algebra? What could the problem be? You might have guessed it. We've got an X symbol there, but X in this means a multiplication. You might read this as a mathematician and go like, oh, I don't know if that's an X as a letter, meaning any number, or an X for a multiplication. So remember, when we do use an X in algebra, we do use that backwards C. Okay, we use a backwards C. But as you have probably figured out by now, mathematicians are actually quite lazy and they like to use a lot of shorthand. So instead of saying 2 lots of A, we just get rid of the X and the multiplication altogether and we simply write 2A. So if you see a number followed directly by a letter, like 2A, that simply means 2 lots of A. 2 lots of A. Okay, so 2A goes in. My answer here, my output will be 2A. So whatever number goes in, I've multiplied it by 2. Now go to my second part of the function machine. I need to add 1. 2A plus 1. And I need to know what my output would be. I don't know what A equals yet, but I know my output's going to be 2A, because that's what's gone in as my input, and I'm going to add 1 to it. So that would be my output. 2a plus 1. And that's how I would write that in algebra. 2a plus 1 is the rule for this function machine, and that's to use any number for a. So if I say, you know what, Mr. Conway, a, I'm going to write it here, a equals 4. Okay, a equals 4. So if a equals 4, every time I see the letter a, I'm going to change it to a 4. So my a here would be a 4 right underneath. 4 times 2 is 8. So I put that in brackets so not to confuse me. 8. 8 plus 1 is 9. So that's how you would use algebra to solve any calculation for a function. So I'm going to rub that off just to not confuse you. So there we are. That's how you would use a two-way function machine and use algebra to calculate any number. So I can put any number in this function machine now and I'll get my answer. 2a plus 1. So there's a bit of algebra for you. If you're not too sure about today's lesson, please look at yesterday's lesson just to help you. And if you want any further advice on that, please let me know and I'll create another how-to guide for you. Alright then, Year 6ers, enjoy your algebra. See you later.